Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by David, who's an intermediate photographer, and we have the backstory and the metadata on this one. David says he shot this as part of a contest for his photography club. The theme was city life. He said he liked the busy view up this street, and then his concept, in addition to the view, was to blur the people who were crossing the street. Says he took a number of shots from this location, and he picked this one because he felt like it really conveyed the feeling that he was going for. And we don't have the camera body information, but we have all the other metadata. David shot this at 70 millimeters, so that could mean this was shot with a real short telephoto, but I'm sort of guessing that this is a crop factor camera, and that 70 millimeters is more like 110 or something like that. It has that feeling to it of a little bit more compression. I'll talk more about that in a second. David shot this at f5.6 at 1/8 of a second. And right away, one of the things I love about the image is what David was trying to accomplish here. I love the juxtaposition of the blurring of the people with other things in the shot that are static. A still photograph, probably better than any other art form, just does such a great job of implying motion. And the other thing I love about this image is that it's very layered in terms of David's concept. There's sort of multiple levels of that reality. You have the people blurred here, then cars that are static, more people that are blurred, cars that are static, a car moving here, a person that's doing something there that's blurred. And that rhythm of kind of movement, static, movement moves all the way through the image. And so I think just having the eye to choose this location is great. The other thing that I think was smart here was going to monochrome, trying to imagine the scene in color, and then there's a lot going on here to begin with, and then trying to imagine it in color. It's pretty easy to imagine getting overwhelmed by all the different ideas. So I think monochrome was a good choice here. And as I mentioned before, I think the compression of the lens is creating some drama and is really helping this image. So just real quick for people that may be watching the critique today that are just getting into photography, just a basic concept to think about is the longer we go on our lenses, the more we can compress subjects that are maybe very far apart. We can create the illusion that the distance from here to here is much shorter, and we can use that sort of stacking effect or compression effect to make the relationship between all of these different subjects more dramatic by bringing them closer together. Or we could want the kind of drama that happens when we put on a very wide-angle lens and we start to create the illusion that things that are maybe not that far apart are stretched out further. And that's just sort of the perspective distortions that you can get working both ends of the extreme in terms of very wide lenses and very long lenses. Another thing that I like about this image is it's framed in a way that's pretty simple, even though there's a lot going on. This real obvious cut here, just straight across on the crosswalk, real nice framing, dramatic framing at the bottom of the image, and then you get a real strong sense of this sort of arcing framing at the top with the dark trees, sort of an end to the image. And I think that works really well here. Starting an image at the bottom that's this graphic with this sort of very definite negative space that's very even all the way across is kind of crying out for something at the top that's also pretty symmetric and pretty balanced. So even though this is an arch, it really kind of goes all the way across the image and plays out in a way that's very consistent, like the bottom part of the framing here. And I think that works really well. There's also a nice feeling of rhythm in terms of this moment, this image that David has picked with the two layers of cars, sort of this kind of line and this line, and then sort of the negative space in between. That works really well. When I start to think about perfect world improvement for this image, I would love for it to be even a little bit more simple and a little bit more graphic. So I want to mention a couple of things. I think this location is amazing for this kind of shot. So we have to imagine this because it doesn't involve anything that I'm going to do to the image. But one of the things I think would be interesting for David to do, if this is a location he can get back to, is to see if he could use quality of light to simplify this a little bit more. Right now, one of the things I'd like to change about the image is I would like for the main idea, which is the blurred people here in the foreground coming across the sidewalk, to separate a little bit more with everything else in the image. And because we can't we're not really going to work so much here with shallow depth of field to do this because we're doing a motion blur. So the idea of juxtaposing some things that are sharp with other things in the background maybe that are soft is not going to work, because one of our concepts is to blur these people. And even though they're blurred, the reality is, with everything being in the same quality of light and then going to monochrome, it's hard to get these people to separate against the background unless you just get incredibly lucky like this, where this guy is sort of sitting in between the two areas of the car that help him to separate. So one of the things I could think about was quality of light. It may be the way the street lamps are placed, that in twilight or very late twilight, even going into nighttime, there could be a light that falls across this crosswalk, and a lot of times there is. And so you have a pool of light here, then dark, then a pool of light, and that might really help to simplify the concept of this image. So one thought is just going back at another time and seeing if quality of light in twilight would create some separation. If I was just going to work with this image, I'd like to do this. I'd like to come in and essentially make the framing of the image much darker, sort of much heavier. I'd also like to tone down the pavement. Remember, our eye goes to the area of highest contrast, and boy, there are a lot of areas of high contrast in here, and then next to bright areas. And all of this bright in here is really drawing my eye past the main ideas, and so I'd like to tone that down. I'd like to add contrast to the blurred figures in the image, and lots of contrast right in here in the crosswalk. I want to bring the main idea forward, and I know that contrast is the most powerful visual element of design. And so if I can add more contrast to the main subject and then turn down the contrast in areas that aren't the main subject, then hopefully I can bring the main idea forward. And one other detail that I'll mention here is this leg being blurred to the point where you can't see it. For me, starts to really hurt the balance of the image. Over here you've got these two guys, and they have this perfect V shape, and he's almost making it, and then there's no leg there, and my mind goes over to here and then out of the image. And so I'd like to put another leg on that guy. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Sounds really strange to me at 5:30 in the morning. Okay, so here we go. I've just started off with a quick curves adjustment, just darken the pavement down. I've done that in a pretty rough way. Sorry, that doesn't look so great. And I added a leg to that guy. And you're seeing me come in and get rid of those power lines in the back. I think in some shots, you could, or in a lot of shots, you could have power lines all over the place, and they could work with what's happening. But here, for me, they're really breaking up this layered design that I talked about earlier. And in some respects, it's making this feel more static. And it's a small detail, but in this one, if you're open to changing the editorial content, I'd get rid of that. And to me, it makes a huge difference in how I move all the way back to the end of the image. It's nice because this, in effect, sort of becomes a coda to this without the power lines in there. The next thing that I did was significantly darken the road now and added a lot more contrast to the people in the foreground. And the last thing that I did was digital gardening up there in that top framing where there's a lot of high contrast. And here's where we started. Let's see. And here's where we ended up. This is just, it's a little bit over the top. It's a lot more graphic. But for me, this is a little bit simpler. Having said all that, love David's concept here. Love this location. I think he's got a great eye to pick this location. This is a location that if I wanted to do a series of these city life shots, you could go back and shoot the same location over and over and over again. Very powerful way to work as a photographer is to just say to the viewer, okay, I'm showing you this view, but I'm going to show you all the different ways that it changes, shooting it in different qualities of light. And of course, there would always be different combinations of people and cars and energy and so on and so forth. Really cool shot as far as this concept of city life goes. And we want to thank David for submitting this image to the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique. See you tomorrow, everybody.